everyone, and welcome to the CXO Masterclass, Future-Proof Your Sales Organization, Preparing for Change and Uncertainty. In this episode, we're going to be focusing on the sales pipeline velocity and optimizing for top performance. Our special guest today is Molly McKinstry. She's the head of sales at Calendly. Welcome, Molly.
Hi, Joy. So nice to see you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about our conversation today.
Let's talk first a little bit about Calendly, and for people who may not be familiar, tell us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Calendly is a scheduling automation platform. There's certainly so much more than just that. We are a tool that organizations use from sales to customer success, marketing, recruiting, really wall to wall across an organization to help streamline and automate their scheduling processes. And it's really not just scheduling the meeting, it's kind of the entire life cycle of a meeting. So, we all of us who host external meetings with folks outside of our organization know that calendar alignment and making availability known for multiple attendees, and if you can imagine scheduling with multiple people outside of your organization, it's actually quite complex. We are really the technology behind automating that, and saving time in the back end of setting up a meeting so you can spend the time on actually the fruitful discussion that the meeting will support.
How has that changed? When we were in the pandemic, how were sales then? I mean, did you see this explode because everyone was really looking for some sort of online tool?
Yeah, so I think obviously so much has changed as a result of the pandemic, and the business environment has been no different. And specifically for sales professionals, since to your point, Joy, I am the head of sales, and that's my background. We've seen a lot of shifting in the landscape selling kind of post pandemic. So a few things that come to mind. One, asynchronous tools for real time collaboration became a must have. If we think of the world where everybody was gathering in person and maybe working side by side, having face to face meetings with prospective buyers and customers, that is just far less likely to happen in a world dominated by, remote work. Certainly not all industries are the same. But so this need for async collaboration and tools and investment in technology certainly is a trend that has come and increased through the pandemic. And I do not think is going to slow down. We also know that the optimization for business ROI is more critical than ever. And probably that's even more connected to the macroeconomic environment we are in and going into as much as what the pressure the pandemic put on us, because there's just a scrutinized need to understand how are we driving business outcomes, and making sure that all of the resources that companies are investing in are helping improve their bottom line and really make a difference in whatever their business goals are. That was always the case pre-pandemic as well, but I think again, just the macroeconomic environment that we are in, working asynchronously, there's just increased pressure for making sure if you are selling today, your ROI is clear, the business impact you are driving is very known.
When it comes to just the effectiveness of sales pipeline management, what are some key characteristics there?
Yes, I'm a person who loves this topic, and I don't know that everyone could say that, but maybe it means I chose the right profession. And you probably are aware of the Harvard Business Review data that says there's an 18% difference in revenue growth between companies that have a defined formal sales process and kind of sales pipeline management experience relative to those who don't. And that doesn't surprise me one bit. I think that, I'm an enormous believer that a sales process across your sales organization, defining very specific moments in your sales journey and how those look and show up in your sales pipeline, it is critical to ensure you can scale, evaluate, and progress the sales journey for your company. People say sales, is an art and a science. And from a pipeline management perspective, it is absolutely a science. And I'm a huge proponent for getting very clear, very specific on language that you are going to use as you think about managing your pipeline, as you think about rolling out a sales process, and the very specific steps along that process. Because really, you hear people say, sales is a game of numbers, and that's true. Of course, there's a lot that goes into value and style, but as we talk about pipeline and managing pipeline and pushing deal velocity through your sales forecast, it is a science, and it really comes down to how well you run that. Yeah, so I think kind of two parts to the answer. So if we think about one from a sales leader perspective, how do you want to show up in your CRM if you're using Salesforce, whatever you're using, look at the pipeline you have and have confidence in it. You want to believe that the probability of the deals that you're seeing, they're accurate, and that you can kind of create this predictable revenue machine, which is not possible if your team is not adhering to a cohesive and consistent process. So from the science perspective, this is where terminology, key characteristics of kind of the moment along the sales journey matter a lot. So I'll give you a couple of examples. In my career, I've been lucky to have a lot of exposure to different sales frameworks and sales systems. Sandler, Franklin Covey, Challenger Sale. Actually, at Calendly, we have been using Winning by Design. They're all slightly different systems, but they again are creating a framework for your sales organization to consistently approach from language, from coaching, and ultimately create a predictive pipeline for you as a leader, as a revenue leader, to have confidence in. I would also say investing in a third party tool or consulting firm like the ones I've referenced, it is a big investment, but I think it is an absolute critical one. If you do not have consistent language that your team thinks of in the qualifying stage, in the discovery stage, in a proposal and trade stage of an opportunity, you really are leaving so much to chance, and it's going to very much depend on the person involved in every deal. And so if you're working at an organization with multiple sellers, multiple hundred, depending upon the size, you need a system that you follow and that you adhere to. If you were to ask me the question, and sorry to kind of lead myself, but which part of the sales process is the most important as you think of, again, pipeline, revenue predictability? The top of funnel, earlier stage qualification and discovery is absolutely critical to get right for your team and for your sales organization, because you first need to know, have we qualified the pipeline that we have? Meaning, to your point, when you talk about stakeholders at your prospective customers, are the right people involved? Have we tested need and business objectives? Do we understand budget? Do we understand timing? If you don't have all of that known, and if your team is not all being coached on that same kind of guidance, you're going to get pipeline that, again, may look good in theory, and the numbers that you see give you some comfort. But if we haven't done that work up front through qualification and discovery, you're probably going to find that the conversion rate there is low and not where you need it to be. So to your point, yes, there are absolutely ways early in that sales journey that you want to differentiate yourself and your product, of course, but you also need to get very clear on the problems that your customer or prospect are trying to solve and how you position your organization to help them solve those.
Can you share some of those insights into really what success looks like at each stage, and then really how sales leaders can go about achieving this?
Yes. So, again, just following the Winning by Design framework, because that's the one I'm living in at the moment, there's a couple of different phases if you think of a sales opportunity journey. There's qualification, discovery, validation, and then proposal, trade, all the way to close. All of those obviously have very, very different and unique specific steps. So I'll try to summarize kind of each one, each one. So qualification, as I said, this is absolutely incredible because we need to know, is the prospect that we are talking to, or if it's a current customer and we're talking about an expansion opportunity, do they have a need right now that it needs to be solved? Is this even the right time to be talking? And if we believe yes, they have a need, through qualification, we really have to vet out, are we in the running for helping to solve that? And kind of through scoping this opportunity, you want to understand how critical this need is. Tell me the stakeholders involved in trying to solve this problem, and what else have you done about it? Because you really want to try to get to, what is this costing your business right now? And in the absence of doing anything, let's kind of talk about what happens if we don't act. So through qualification, that's where I think you really, really get to understand, should we be talking right now? Is there a need? Do you have budget for this? And is there agreement that this cannot go unsolved? Now, of course, you got to get into the fun part of conveying your product is the perfect product to solve it. So that's qualify. We get into discovery. This is where you're really going to get this deep next level understanding of what this problem is and begin to position your product as a potential solution. But I think this is a mistake that a lot of sales teams make, is that we hear one kind of high level problem and you immediately go into pitching your solution. Oh, you've got that problem, we can solve it. And oftentimes your sales team hasn't gone deep enough to really get to, again, what's the business impact this is having? And not, you don't want to commoditize yourself in, oh, maybe this is a challenge you're having and maybe there's a bunch of different tools that can solve it. If you ask the right questions, if you're thoughtful and thorough through that pain funnel, you should be leaving that conversation with, our product is really the only one that's going to solve the uniqueness of your needs and the solution that you're looking for. So to me, those are the most critical. From there, obviously you're going to go through validation, proposal, you're going to bring probably more people to the conversation, you're going to revalidate the pain story that you heard and the business outcome that you're going to drive. But if you get that information up front and you do your work in the beginning, stuff like going over a proposal and a rollout and implementation, that should be simpler because you've done the hard work and you've already gotten the buyer to tell you, we cannot move forward without something.
That's almost then the icing on the cake. By the time you get to the proposal, it's really almost making the prospect there just want you. Like, I can't live without you because everything that you offer, I need.
That is the icing on the cake. And I know not all sales opportunities come together that way, but I will tell you, I was listening to a call that one of my team members hosted, just, kind of making dinner, listening to calls. And I heard the prospect say, you've already sold us on Calendly. We know we need it. We know we need automation. We know we need this as part of our tech stack. Now you and I just have to figure out how we get it done. And for me, this was just this moment for my team member where that you've had your buyer say, we're sold on you. Now we have to go through, to your point, exact packaging, exact cost, exact launch and implementation. But you're not going to be told that feedback from a customer and a prospect if you don't do the work up front, really understanding their needs, what problems they have, and how to position your product as driving business results to that solution.
So Molly, then what level of customization or personalization here do you ensure at each stage? And then how critical is this element to this whole process?
It is very critical, and I'm realizing I'm saying all of this is very important. So I'm not trying to convey that sales is an easy job. It's certainly not. But personalization and customization is very important because you want your prospect, again, or your customer, if you're talking about an expansion opportunity, to know, a day in their life, right? And so if you think about a prospect, maybe this is a cold outreach, they are not expecting to hear from you. Your BDR, your SDR, your team is reaching out. How are you going to differentiate yourself? And this is where I just love the creativity that I'm seeing out there right now in prospecting outbound efforts with using video. People are doing such deep, rich research. Obviously you can go on LinkedIn, you can see somebody's background, you can see who else you're connected to, education. I love and always try to prop up and celebrate my team members who are just making the most customized, unique outbound messaging to get the attention of a prospect. I'm sure both you and I receive prospect emails every day. And when I have an email that, the subject is Molly, your time at the University of Florida. That's where I went to college. Or, Molly, your time at Glassdoor. That's a company I spent time at previous to Calendly. I immediately know this person has done their research, and I'm going to at least spend a minute to open their email and see what they have to say. So I do think personalization, customization is huge. But Joy, this would be my other point. If you have grabbed the attention of the person you're trying to get time with, that is the hardest part. So now, once you do that, leverage technology and automation tools to get the actual meeting set, right? Because in the absence of using a tool to help you do that, if someone writes you back and says, hey, sure, I'll chat, now you're going to go back and forth on the ping pong of getting that time on the calendar. But instead, if you have a scheduling link embedded in your website, embedded in your email signature, you are making it so much easier for that customized personal outreach that you spent all that time creating to turn into an actual meeting, and your top of funnel activity has begun. So I just can't underscore the importance of leveraging technology and automation. I think that, this is a certainly interesting time to be in sales, be in technology. But also, I don't think that the opportunity here is a bad one. This is where, you kind of like rubber hits the road. You really get to test the stamina and the grit of your sales teams, of your sales process, of your value messaging, and what you're doing to differentiate your product. So I think for the organizations or audience here, there's a lot that you can do to stand out and differentiate yourself. So we know our buyers are going to have budget constraints. We know that. We're seeing layoffs all around us. We are seeing tightening of the wallet. And so this means buyers are going to need to justify their spending and make a business case for any new tech. And every decision is going to be scrutinized even more so than it was pre-pandemic, even in the last 2 years. I do think 2023, we are going to have to be really innovative to get access to new budgets and create space for a new product. As a sales organization, you also need to focus on ROI and how, and I know I said this through the discovery and qualification process, but what is the impact on the business your product is going to have? So for my sales teams and for anyone that I talk to in sales, it's like your ROI story has to be crystal clear. Teams need to drive outcomes on the onset, and buyers are going to need to say, if they're trying to put a case together for new budget or moving budget from an existing source, what data and insights can we as a sales team share with them to say, you should have a bunch of faith and confidence that we're going to drive your business forward. And it's not just a set of features. It is not, just this is what the product does. It is, this is how the product is going to help you run your business more efficiently, drive stronger business outcomes, and again, help you have success. Certainly, last but not least, I also think you need to think of the user experience. We know asynchronous work is all around us, and people just do not have time for friction in the customer journey, the user journey. They want things simple and fast and seamless. And so I think as you're investing in tools and as you're investing in understanding your sales process, really make sure you are removing the obstacles that are creating friction either for your end users or your customers, and honestly, both. It is more than ever, your product needs to be a joy to interface with. Everybody needs to love it. And of course, the role of the sales organization is to help advocate for that and make it very known to the buyer. So I think if you see pipeline stagnation or low conversion rates and you are not getting the results that you want, there's a couple of things to look for. So, obviously first and foremost, we've talked about the importance of defining your process. It is very hard to diagnose a problem in your sales process when you don't have one, right? And so talking about the stages again of qualification, discovery, validation to trade, etc., if you have created crystal clear swim lanes for what happens at every single one of those phases in the journey, you then get to pull data again from your CRM to see, oh, we are losing deals at this trade stage, right? Like when we are going in and basically talking about whether it's proposal, whether it's pricing, whatever it is, we are losing deals at this moment. If you don't have a clear definition of the characteristics of each stage, it is very hard to then go fix and change those stages. The component also, though, around how to maximize velocity, this is where, again, we are just very, very firm believers in getting in front of a prospect or a customer as soon as you are top of mind for them, and they're wanting to have a conversation, they're wanting to learn about your product, they're wanting to do their research. You simply cannot miss those moments. And so investing in technology and tools that create that as a seamless, very, very easy experience is going to increase your chances of getting in front of your customers, will likely increase your overall opportunity pipeline, but that's where having very clear defined definitions of how to manage that pipeline is critical. We of course are a big believer in investing in tools that helps your team save time, but also just drives robust and rich impact to your business. So it's certainly not just about time savings. But if I think of my sales teams, we have several tools that link basically to our demand generation strategy. So our amazing marketing team is out there working hard, trying to, drive up interest and awareness in Calendly, not unlike any organization who has a sales team trying to go to market and trying to drive revenue. It is so important that then the sales organization knows where those leads are, how those leads are scored, and how to follow up with those leads. So if you're not using a tool that supports this, thinking, outreach, thinking Sales Loft, thinking of a HubSpot, I would absolutely strongly recommend that you research adding a tool like that, because it's going to strengthen your top of funnel conversion and ensure that the work of your marketing team trying to drive awareness to your brand is being captured and caught in the net of your sales organization, where we know how to then follow up and talk to these different prospective buyers. The theme of, automation is going to continue. I came to Calendly because I think it is such an incredible product, and the sales organization that I had been running previously, I felt like, oh my goodness, this would have been such a great tool for us to solve some of the problems and challenges that we were having. Certainly, we're not the only, player in the space. We are the market leader. We work with, 50,000 companies and have over 10 million users. But I strongly, strongly believe that adding some scheduling automation to your sales team's toolkit is critical. You, to the point of, want to make it easy to book time with them. You do not want to stall your deals. So this includes linking on your website, in having it in all of your email signatures, just making sure that actually getting in touch with your sales team is easy and seamless and friction free. The other tool that I I will say I just absolutely love, and they are not the only one in the space. So I'll kind of broadly represent the category is revenue predictability tools, also connected to forecasting tools. But Gong is obviously a very well-known tool in the space. We leverage it heavily at Calendly, and Clary is also, another example. Chorus. There's these tools out there that basically not only let you call record, which certainly is valuable, but it overlays basically AI to help you run your sales process and say, based on what we're hearing and based how the call conversation went, this is the predictability we would give these deals for closing and progressing along your sales process. So when you have a defined sales process and then you are using forecasting tools, automated tools, revenue predictability tools, you get all of these rich insights to very clearly tell you, these are where we're having challenges. This is where there are gaps breaking down, and this is where we need to invest our time to solve. The metrics that you track should mirror the sales process that you run. So if you are going to put an emphasis on qualification and discovery, then we need to have numbers associated with how many qualification calls do we need to be having, how many discovery conversations and interactions do we need to be having a week, because it's a funnel, right? So the more you put in at the top, obviously the output, you're not going to win 100% of the deals that the first conversation you ever have. But if you're measuring and tracking this as a business, you begin to understand kind of your at bat conversion rate, right? So if you have a BDR or an SDR organization, absolutely you want to be tracking how many conversations are we having a week, how much outreach in both phone calls and emails and cadences connected to the marketing campaigns. How are we progressing those along? Because if we're not even creating enough kind of at-bat moments, once we're all the way down through the funnel, we're not going to get there. So from a top of funnel perspective, I want to look at sales qualified opportunities. You want to look at calls hosted. You want to look at discovery conversations held. You want to look at email open rate, email cadence, all of that. It is kind of volume driven, but if you're not tracking it, you're not going to know your win rate at the end, which would give you the information on what to measure up front. From there, as you get further down funnel, again, if you assume you have effectively run a discovery process, you understand the pain that you are trying to solve for these prospects, this is where I think a lot of the stylistic finesse stuff does come into play. How you present pricing, who you present pricing to. Do you send pricing in an email? Do you have live conversations to review pricing? There's a bunch of different schools of thought on this. I'm always going to be a proponent of, you want to talk your buyer and your champion through live whatever proposal you've put together and map it back to, again, what problems you're solving. But I want to measure how many of these conversations are we having a week? Because again, if you're talking about your win rate, if you measure this consistently, you should be able to back into we need to host 4 proposal conversations a week per seller in order to hit our goal, right? And if you measure that and then you look at it against your output, you begin to understand what the baseline should be. And I think that's probably the challenge that maybe some sales organizations have. And I think you were alluding that to like, well, how do you know what success looks like? If you don't have a baseline, you can't define success. So if you don't begin measuring and tracking all of the things we're discussing, you won't be able to say, this is what success looks like. We need 4 discovery calls a week. We need 2 proposal conversations a week. We need 2x pipeline coverage and revenue. Those things, you're not going to be able to create a baseline if you don't begin to measure.
And if you really don't meet those metrics, then you're not going to get the new clients in, because one call, one email a week is not going to do the job.
No, it is not whatsoever. And I think, again, in the economy that we are in and looking at some of the headwinds we are facing, this is where you want to ensure your team understands what does success look like, and how are we going to honestly probably have to change the equation a little bit, because it's going to be harder in a budget constraint, possible down economy environment. We may have to do more to get the results that we seek. But if you've got the definitions of what happens along your process, you should be able to know where to invest your time along the way.
So, if we're going to prioritize from your experience, and we're talking about all those different levels of metrics there, what would you say then are the 2 to 3 most crucial ones to really
Yeah.
focus on and to hone in on?
So the number that I care about the most for my sales organization, and this doesn't totally parlay to like a BDR SDR role, but if we're talking about sales executives who own their own revenue target, you have to measure the number of discovery conversations they are having a week. And I really focus again on discovery, because if we have trained them well and thoughtfully on how to run a pain funnel conversation and how to get to a business outcome need, if we have confidence in our ability to do that, then we have to measure that we're doing it, right? And so I really want to ensure I know how many discovery calls it takes for us to win a deal. And then I want to go back and say, is the team meeting this metric? And because if they're not, you get to sit down and say, we're behind the entry target. This is one of the earliest things that happens in the process. So if we are behind here, this high in the this up in the process, how are we going to get to the final outcome goal? So I strongly recommend measuring the number of discovery calls a week, with the important caveat: have a very well-defined discovery process that your team adheres to and follows, because then you have confidence in it. I was just going to say, from the BDR SDR component, so maybe you have people who are helping build and create pipeline on behalf of your sales team. I want to see sales qualified opportunities from that group. So if we kind of think of the sales process, discovery is going to come after qualification. But from those biz dev, sales dev representatives, we want to be having as many qualifying conversations as we can. They don't need to run a full, robust discovery process. In fact, we don't want them to. We want them to get it to their sales counterpart. But they should have, again, that playbook, that framework of, this is how we qualify. These are the things that we need to know and validate before we have a discovery conversation. So if you're a leader of a BDR and SDR organization, sales qualified opportunities is a key metric to track, also called SQOs.
In this, like with all of these opportunities that you're trying to tap into, in this market expansion, do you think it's achievable with a lot of uncertainty during our times?
Yeah, so the concept of expansion, I think also some people call that fracking, where it's basically you're trying to invest in your existing customer base, right, to expand your partnership, and depending upon your product, either add more users to your tool, have them spend more, depending upon, again, how your product operates. I think this is really smart. I absolutely think expansion is a very, very key way to sell in a down economy or an economy facing headwinds. It goes back to this user experience, customer experience. You want your customers to love doing business with you, love your product. They, should feel like they can be ambassadors of your product. And if you have done that, then yeah, certainly thinking about upselling or cross-selling into their organization, increasing your footprint is a very, very smart thing to do always, but certainly in an economy where net new buyers may be harder to find, because we just said getting new budget right now is not going to happen easily. Chances are you're going to have to take the budget from another tool or resource that your prospect is using to convince them to move it over to yours. Now, what do you think is easier, doing that for someone who already believes in your product, already has invested something in you, than a net new prospective buyer? I really do think that in if you go back to customer experience, user experience, your product is a delight, you should be proactively as a sales organization reaching out to your customers and asking, how can we as your vendor, as your partner, help you all in the year ahead as we're looking at the macroeconomic environment we are? What can we do to help you? And yes, certainly maybe people are thinking, well, aren't they going to just say, help me save money and, give me a better discount? If you've run a thoughtful discovery and really the depth of the challenges your customers are trying to solve, not necessarily. They may say to you, I'm actually being squeezed right now and I have to get the number of vendors that I'm working with cut in half. Are you hearing any other customers having to do this? Like, I'd love to hear on what you're hearing in the market. This is where you get to position yourself as thought leaders, but this is also where you get to say, two of the other vendors that you have, that's actually an arena we also have capabilities. So right now, you're maybe not leveraging that component of our product suite, but I'd love to show you how you could. And since you're already existing customer, I'm sure we could get you a more affordable solution than the one you're using over there.
You mentioned fracking, Molly. Let's talk then about that and really how sales leaders can leverage that during this time of change.
Yeah, and again, just the way I think of fracking is ultimately where we look for new opportunities across existing deals and customers to extract more value than just kind of starting from scratch and trying to find digging new trenches, if you will. So I think there's a lot here, and if for the sales leaders listening or the RevOps leaders listening, this is where going back to process systems, having a really well-defined playbook on how your team can think about this and deploying this approach, I think is going to be critical in 2023. So some components that would help you create that. Sales insights inform sales strategy. So you need to know what are the moments along your customer journey that create buying signals or upgrading signals or cross-selling signals in your product itself. Of course, every product is going to be different. If you're software, if you're media, there are different things to look for, but you need to know what are those factors, because if you basically measure and track and understand, I'll give you an example. We know that seat adoption for people who buy Calendly licenses is a very good indicator of an expansion opportunity, because if the number of people that are using Calendly in an organization, the adoption is high, they're in the product daily, they're using it to set every meeting they schedule, we know from an insight perspective that we should get on the phone with our customer and say, who else would benefit from using this? Because the adoption is so high and healthy. And that's, of course, what we love. That's an example for Calendly, but I would encourage everyone to think about, what is that example for your business? What is the insight you can garner from your product itself that would then give the sales team an opportunity to call and reach out to their customer saying, hey, we see this is happening and how you're using our product. We'd love to talk about how we can support X, Y, and Z to, even further amplify the results you're getting. This is where fracking again is a term that I think is connected to the outcome you want, but we cannot forget that creating the relationships and the trust with your customers as partners is absolutely critical for any luck at an expansion approach. They need to know that you understand the business that they are in, you understand the problems that they are facing daily, and it's not just about your product, it's how as a partner you can help them find success and thrive, in the macroeconomic environment we are in. It's kind of go back to the basic stuff of like, invest in those relationships, differentiate yourself as a vendor. When you've done that, you're the person they're going to call and say, help, how do I got to get my resources again cut in half. What can we do? And you're in a position to bring that solution to the table.
I think I know when I'm dealing with other outside vendors and knowing how many clients that they're juggling, but yet I've said to them before, thank you for making me feel as if I'm the only one you're dealing with, because I really feel that that relationship just sets the person apart, and it makes me want to be loyal then to your product, to your platform, when that relationship is built.
Yeah, and I think another such smart thing to deploy in an overall expansion strategy, and I think the best salespeople do this naturally and actually love to, is reach out to your customer, give them what we call gifts. Don't just reach out to them when you need something, when you want to sell them more, when you want an introduction to a member of their team. Bring gifts to them that will help them in their job in again whatever space they're in, with no ask in return. Hey Joy, I saw this thought leadership article and podcast. I thought of you and thought you would love it. If you have a minute, take a listen. Or hey, I know when we last spoke you mentioned this company was an important partner for you all. I actually just realized one of my dear friends works there. Can I make an introduction? Giving those gifts, not asking for anything in return, means, to your point, that kind of trust and that relationship development, it really comes to fruition in a time when times are harder. So I think from a global perspective, a sales process is relevant no matter the size of your company, no matter your average deal size, no matter what. If you are positioning a product in the market and you have hired people to help you drive revenue to do that, you must have a process for them to follow. Depending upon the size of your organization, it may be more simple, it may be complex, but table stakes, establish a sales process that you can enable your team to follow from start to finish. In terms of that process, I would strongly recommend investing in qualification and discovery. You want world-class sellers to lead a customer through a business outcome pain funnel conversation to get very, very specific revenue ROI connected data on what need this customer has. All the way to closure, you need to map back to that problem. So when you are negotiating price, when you are, going through an MSA, you constantly pull back the reminder to the discovery that you've run through. And then I think last but not least, we've said, invest in that customer journey, make yourself differentiated by the user experience, the customer experience, and genuinely investing in relationship development. If you run an incredible discovery process all the way to closure, and then you invest deeply and authentically in those customer relationships and that customer experience, your retention is going to be incredibly high and healthy. Yeah, I am an opportunist, and an optimist by nature, but I mean, I think this is where the cream rises to the top, if you will, right? When the economy is booming and everybody is buying things left and right, it's easy to find success. But when things are harder, when you are forced to differentiate yourself, when you are forced to really, really kind of put in that extra mile to win a sale, that's where the genius happens, if you will, right? Like that is where the best of the best differentiate themselves. So for our team, we're constantly talking about grit. We are constantly talking about, do the hard things, go the extra mile, make no excuses. And I think people who are in the sales profession and very, intangibly represent those traits, this is their time to shine. This is their time to really differentiate themselves from the pack. And I certainly believe my team is inclusive of those people. And, we're very fortunate to work at a company that I think is a differentiator on its own.
Molly, thank you so much for sharing those top tips. Definitely can help any sales organization. Molly McKinstry, head of sales with Calendly, thank you so much. And we hope you enjoyed this episode of the CXO Masterclass.